Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Nicodemus. I am the Assistant Director of the CFA. I'm here to present Ria Brodell, Butch Heroes, the Zoom lecture. To give you a little background on our two panelists, I'll start with Erin Riley-Lopez, the question person. Erin Riley-Lopez is a doctoral candidate in art history at Tyler School of Art and Architecture, Temple University in Philadelphia, PA. Her specialty is contemporary art with research interests in queer, trans, and feminist theories, exhibition histories, institutional critique, and performance art. She was a curator of the Freedman Gallery at Albright in Reading, PA from 2012 to 2017, where she also taught courses in art history and arts administration and served on the design oversight committee. From 2005 to 2009, she served as the curator of the Bronx Museum of the Arts, where she organized collection-based and annual Artist in the Marketplace, or AIM, exhibitions. Riley-Lopez received her MA from the Center of Curatorial Studies at Bard College and her BA from Sarah Lawrence College. And for the main person of the show, Ria Brodell is an artist, educator, and author based in Boston. Their work explores gender, sexuality, and identity within the context of history, contemporary society, and religion. Brodell attended the School of Art Institute of Chicago, received a BFA from Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, and an MFA from the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Tufts University. Brodell has exhibited internationally and throughout the United States, is a recipient of the Artadio Award, a Massachusetts Cultural Council Artist Fellowship, and the SMFA Traveling Fellowship. Their work has appeared in New York Magazine, The Guardian, Art News, The Boston Globe, and New American Paintings, among other publications. Brodell's first book, Butch Heroes, was released in 2018. Volume 2 is forthcoming via MIT Press. And just so everyone understands that this is going to be a bit of a conversational piece between Ria and Erin, I'm going to be facilitating, but I'm going to mute myself now and turn it over to them. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. And thanks, Ria. This is really exciting to be here with you. And also to return, at least virtually to the Freedman Gallery. So this is exciting. So I thought maybe we'd start with discussing a little bit about the impetus for creating your series Butch Heroes, as well as your choice to use the term Butch in the title.
Sure. I will share some images, but I guess I'll talk about the word Butch first. So I struggled actually when I first started the series back in 2010, which is like forever ago. Like when you think about it, like I was talking to a friend about it recently and I was like, man, like, terms like non-binary didn't exist. Facebook was brand new. Instagram wasn't around. Like the internet was a totally different place. It was wacky. And I was trying to find an inclusive term that had a history for me personally and a history within the community that wasn't necessarily like too like specific, but not too broad. And Butch is a word that was kind of slung around at me when I was a kid as an insult, but it also meant tough and masculine and strong, and I like that. I like that term. It has a history in the queer community, both in the gay male community and in the lesbian community, but so it has that too. And so that's why I chose to use it as opposed to like more broad terms. Yeah. So I will we'll share screen here so we can start. Okay. Okay, so can everybody see that hopefully? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a piece called Self-Portrait as a Nun or Monk, circa 1250. And it's gouache on paper. It's a little bigger than the Butch Heroes. It's 12 by 15 inches. And it was kind of late in a series that came before Butch Heroes, which is a series called Handsome and the Holy. And in that series, I think I did that from 2008 to 2010. I was looking specifically at my own childhood and my own Catholic upbringing and what it was like as a kid to kind of know I was queer. And I was definitely like what would be now like gender non-conforming. Played baseball on boys teams and ran around like Rambo. And so that series was, self-portrait as Rambo, playing with G.I. Joe, but also religious vignettes of my like favorite saints, because growing up in a Catholic household, like I knew all about the saints. I went to Catholic school. And this piece came about because as an adult, I was looking back on a time, I think when I was in high school, and I knew I was queer, and I kind of knew what the Catholic Church would think about that, but I didn't know for certain. And so I picked up the Catholic Catechism book off my dad's shelf, which is kind of like the rules and regulations of being Catholic. Mm-hmm. And I looked up the word homosexuality. And in that book, it said that homosexuality, if I was to act on it, was a mortal sin, and that I should live a life in service to the church and see it as my cross to bear. Mm-hmm. And my cross to bear, like cross to bear was a phrase that was often used in my family as a way to recognize hardship. It was like, something bad would happen and my grandma or, aunts or somebody would say like, well, that's your cross to bear. And it was like a challenge you live through because God gave you that challenge. Mm-hmm. So I made this piece thinking back on that time because like, I knew as an adult, like making this piece, like I had a lot of options, but there were a lot of people that joined the church if they were queer to find community. And I was thinking about like, where would I have gone as a, I didn't have the word non-binary yet, or even trans, but like, would I have joined a convent or would I have joined a monastery? Because I don't know, like being in the middle, so that's what this piece was about. And that got me really thinking about how queer folks how did they live in history? Like, how did we get by? How did we find each other? How did we make a living? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, a sort of negotiation, right? This sort of in between. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of how they kind of started. Yeah.
So in my catalog essay for the show, I compare your research for this series to an archaeological dig. And I'm wondering if you can further discuss your process.
Yeah, so it starts with trying to find a person, a real person, not fantasy, not legend, So I'm in the library, I'm on JSTOR looking at journal articles, I'm reading people's dissertations, I'm, looking through newspaper archives, I'm looking for stories of people that I can specifically relate to. So when I thought up the series, that I wanted to answer that question, like how did we survive? And so, but I didn't want to make like this broad encyclopedia of queer folks in history. So I really kept it focused on like my experience and how I identify. So I started out by looking for a person who was assigned female at birth, but presented themselves in a more masculine way. So for some, that could mean they preferred wearing male clothing or doing a male occupation. And for others, that meant that they identified as men. And for others, it's kind of in between, like non-binary would be a term we'd use now. And from there, then I'm like verifying facts. I'm like, okay, what did this person do? How did they live? How did they die? What they think about their life? And sometimes those resources are pretty amazing and amazingly available. So I chose a couple pieces to show you sort of how I go about constructing the painting. So once I find the person and I know that the story is true, and I verify all the facts and I write the sort of shortened narrative of their life, then it's constructing the painting. So in this case, Lisbeth Oldstarter or Mats Ersson, Swedish. And I knew they were executed in the Haymarket in Stockholm. And so I got this, sometimes it just happens, like the composition just happens pretty easily. Like I knew that I wanted to put this person at the moment right before they died. And I don't know what, I can't really put my finger on why, like other than the influence of holy cards. Sometimes there's a lot of death depicted. Maybe it was like really wanting to paint the blood in the snow in Sweden. I don't know, honestly. But for this particular painting, I had a lot of resources. So the universities in Stockholm had a lot of online archives available. So one thing was maps. So the Haymarket in Stockholm still exists. You can still go there. And so I was able to look at maps online in these databases and go all the way back to like the 1400s. So I found the maps from around 1679 and I located the Haymarket, and I could see on the maps like what buildings would be around the Haymarket. And from there I could look at etchings of Stockholm and sort of see what it looked like back then. Some of these etchings I could like really zoom into and see, like, you know, there'll be labels of, you know, the names of the churches and things. The chopping block was like in
Oh wow, yeah,
some of the archives and artifacts. There was also an artist that was traveling through Stockholm in the same year that Oldstarter was executed in 1679. He was making these ink drawings, and I could look at these ink drawings, which were super helpful to tell me like how people were dressing and what some of the buildings looked like and what they would be carrying. And then I could put that all into this particular painting. So in the background, I have a few of the churches. I have a view of the palace way in the back. I knew that what kind of fruits and vegetables they brought to the Haymarket. So I have some turnips and some rutabagas and stuff in the snow in the background. And when it all comes together like that, it's like the most exciting thing, because I have like all these resources that help me put the picture together. And sometimes it's harder than other times. So like with this one, Helen Oliver or John Oliver, they're a working class person, and it's always very tough to find images of working class people, because, you know, only the wealthy folks have the amount of, you know, money or power to have oil paintings made of them and their stories. So finding, I wanted to depict John Oliver just working, because they were a laborer in Scotland, and every time they were discovered, they'd have to move to another town and start a new job and start a new life. And I just wanted to show that kind of just working everyday struggle. And for this one, I found an illustrator, a British illustrator named W.H. Pine, and his like life's work was to depict the trades and the laborers. And this particular page of a book I found in the Boston Public Library, in their arts library. And this was really, really helpful, because now I can see like not only the gestures of what people like look like while they're working, but the clothing that they're wearing, the tools they're using. So like the wheelbarrow there. And then these are some of his illustrated or his colored lithographs in that same book. This is a flesher, and I was just really surprised by these because of the amount of layers that they're wearing, like, and the types of clothing. So he's got this little striped vest on, and this person is wearing spats. And before this, I thought spats were only, you know, worn by wealthy folks, when actually they were just, you know, something to keep stuff out of your shoes. Yeah. And then, yeah, the breeches are untied. There's patches on the pants. So this was really incredibly helpful. Sometimes catalogs of tools, like antique catalogs, nice. YouTube videos. I wanted to like figure out what that motion of plastering a traditional Scottish house looked like. So I found a Scottish father-son plastering team and watched their YouTube videos and took screenshots, so I could get that, you know, this is a traditional Scottish house. And then I can put that motion into the painting. And so, yeah, that's generally how the construction of a painting goes, is just kind of like finding the person, finding the name, finding the dates, verifying facts, and then constructing the image.
That's a really deep dive into it's actually quite incredible that you were not only able to find all of that, but that, you know, all of those, you know, that all aided you in then making the piece. Did you happen by any chance to visit any of the places that were depicted, or was this all done, you know?
And some of them, yeah, for some of them, let's see. There's one I don't have in the slideshow, but I got a traveling fellowship to go to Thailand. And for that, I was able to like actually view specific places in that particular piece, the woodworking and the landscape itself, like being in the landscape was super helpful. Trying to think of other ones. There's one from San Francisco. So like that was pretty easy because I can get to San Francisco fairly easily. But a lot of times it does have to be like they're so far back in history that even if I went to the place, it wouldn't necessarily be helpful because, you know, Germany in 1477 looks a lot different than Germany now. So
I'm also curious to know, just, I mean, on a sort of basic level, like how you even started the research in that, you know, what kinds of terms did you use in order to just find the first person, for example? You know what I mean? Like if you were going to type into a database or something.
Yeah, I mean, mostly it was like going to the library and looking for books. So it would be like going through like books that already existed on our history. So a lot of that was really frustrating at first because it's so focused on men and on Rome and or Sappho and the Greeks. Like it just was like a lot of stuff that wasn't very helpful. Now it has gotten a lot better. There's a lot more available. But yeah, the first thing I did was just kind of go to the library and look, you know, to see what books were already available and what people were already writing about.
Nice. And then how did you decide, and this gets to maybe more of like a criteria or an editing process, you know, once you found these lives, then how did you make a determination about, you know, who would be included?
Yeah, so it's like figuring out whether they fit that criteria, assigned female at birth and more masculine lives. And then it's just kind of, at first that was really easy because all these stories were new to me and they're all super exciting. And it was like, I was just finding so much. And now it's gotten a little bit harder because I want to find people as far back in history as I can. This was the furthest back, Katharina Hetzeldorfer from 1477 in Germany. And the further you go back in history, the less there is available in archives and in terms of resources and things. And the more difficult it is to determine whether it's a true story or not. And then I'm also trying to find people from all over the world. And so in some places, like there's not as many resources for certain reasons. Sometimes there's not resources because it wasn't a big deal to be gender nonconforming or a different sexuality outside of our binary that we have now. Sometimes there are cultures that the binary didn't exist. And so in that way, there's no record of people because it didn't, like most of the time, the reason I'm finding folks is because they made headlines or they were seen as odd in their community or they were put to death or put in jail. And so, yeah, does that answer that question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah.
So I also discussed the series as a queer archive of the future. Of how you dug into the past to bring historical lives into the present as a way forward for the future, which shares something with the you know, queer and performance studies theorist Jose Esteban Munoz and his idea of queer utopia and futurity, and this idea that, you know, the present is not sort of an acceptable place for queer lives to be. And so we have to think about a future in which those lives can be celebrated. So I'm thinking about, what are your hopes for this series going forward? Because it is ongoing.
Yeah, it is ongoing. And yeah, I can come back to these. Hold on, I want to show you these. Right now, I am still exhibiting. This is an image of the first time I exhibited them. So I'm hoping to keep exhibiting the work as I keep making it. I'm always showing them with the narratives and with the sources so that, people can look up those sources themselves. And then there's also volume 2 coming. This was volume 1 here. I first self-published the book because I knew right away, fairly early in the series, that it would be important to keep them all in one kind of form, or one archive, if you will, just so they were all in one place. If they all got disseminated as paintings, they would still be in this collection in a way. And so this first edition was self-published by me and Edition One Press out in Berkeley. And so it's the narratives, it's the sources, and the 25 paintings, I think, at the time. And then this is volume 1. And originally I had wanted the book to look kind of like a Catholic missal, like you find in the church pew, in the churches. And so it has that ribbon and kind of a fake leather binding. And so volume 2 should come out. It'll have a couple essays in it. I had wanted the first edition to have essays, but we didn't have the time. So it'll have some essays, maybe an interview, some more paintings, and they'll release it with volume 1 and as a paperback too. So, so yeah, I think that is super. It's super important to me. It's gotten further than I would have ever, thought when I first started the series. It's really kind of expanded around the world. I get emails from folks. I got weirdly 2 emails last week or a couple weeks ago from different people in Sweden wanting to write about Carl Lapp. And this is Carl Lapp here. I'll show you. So yeah, it's reaching people, and that was my goal, was to reach people and tell these stories. So I feel like the book really does that.
Yeah, I also talk about how, especially because, so you're using this format of the prayer card, which we can talk about if you'd like. But you use the term Butch Hero, and so I talk about it as this more sort of secular, as opposed to sainthood. It's more secular sort of version, if you will, of the prayer card format. But also in thinking about how, in terms of an audience and who you're trying to reach, that, folks could find their own hero within your collection of paintings and lives that you're.
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the reasons, Butch is really the only contemporary term that I use from the community, because there are so many, I tried to keep, even though I have that criteria that's personal to me, each one of them, they didn't have this terminology. We thankfully have, ever-changing terminology. And so I try not to refer to them in that way, because there's no way to know really, other than through their narratives, through their narratives and through their actions, I can tell that they fit within the series. But I couldn't say would Rosa Bonheur have identified as a lesbian, or would she have identified as just queer or non-binary? I don't know, but I know that Rosa Bonheur lived her life as a woman, was married to another woman, petitioned the courts to wear male clothing.
Yes.
And so I know that she fits within this series.
Yeah.
But they're each different. So if I go through here, Olga dressed like her male colleagues, here's her in this up on the wall with these mustachioed dudes
Oh,
in the
nice.
Soviet Union. Like when I found this in the catalog for some of their classes at the Moscow Technical Institute. Olga taught analytic geometry, and they still use her textbooks that she wrote in the high schools, apparently. And so, yeah, like Olga's great, but Gregory Pedra or Lamacho kind of went back and forth. Like Mexico City, circa 1796, like went back and forth, dressing as a man, dressing as a woman, sometimes was super mischievous. Like they didn't really know what to do with Lamacho. So could be non-binary, could be trans, I don't know, but I'm just kind of putting them in this category of hero of, this one was one of my favorites to paint, Okuhara Seiko and Watanabe Siren. I put them together because they were partners, and they find cat prints on their work. So I included my cat in the foreground there. And some of their paintings and prints are in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston here. So I included those in the background, sort of in progress. And Okuhara Seiko, when they came of age, they chose a gender neutral name for themselves, and they opened up a school. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then Carl Lapp and Captain Wright, like, lived their lives as men, and it wasn't discovered until, it would be called a deathbed discovery, and that's one of those terms that I can enter into a newspaper database. Like deathbed discovery was often a newspaper headline. In this case, when Captain Wright died, the body goes to the coroner, and the coroner's like, what's this? And the first article in the newspaper was super nice. Like they talk about Captain Wright being this like super fun loving, jovial guy who loved the ladies and loved to drink and dance. And he kept rabbits and bet on their reproductive capabilities. So I knew right away when I found the story that I wanted to paint this person because they sounded super fun. But also, like, with each consecutive, it was like the Sunday paper. And so that first article was like pretty straightforward. Then the second article was like, why did Captain Wright do this? We're going to take some stabs at guessing. And it got like really derogatory really fast. And at the end, they're calling him a creature. And then the next article, there's like lines around the block to view his body. Yeah, and those are pretty tough articles to find sometimes, but yeah. I'm also trying to find their own voice too. So like Jean Benet, this is the one from San Francisco, and that water fountain behind the gilded kind of tower thing is still standing in San Francisco. It's like one of the only things that's still standing after the earthquake in the 1800s. And Jean Benet, like, was just constantly written about in the newspaper. So California has an amazing digital archive of their newspapers, and you can type Jean Benet into their database and tons of stuff pops up. Wow. Every time they were arrested for wearing men's clothing on the street, they would show up in the papers and they'd be fined and thrown in jail for a little while. And it happened repeatedly. And so I was always finding snippets that said like, Jean Benet wishes they were a man and not a woman. This one was pretty funny. They also caught frogs and would sell them to French restaurants to earn extra cash. So this says Jean Benet, the French frog catcher, has been convicted for wearing men's apparel, although she says she has an other. Therefore, if she didn't wear it, she'd be convicted too. So how is she supposed to stay out of prison? And this Corey Anderson and Ralph Carino in Milwaukee, similar situation, arrested, put in jail. There's a trial. So you can find a lot of stuff in the newspapers. And one of the things that I really liked reading from Ralph was, my heart and soul are more of those of a man than a woman. And the psychology of it all is that I changed my sex by application. A woman, I worked as a man, lived as one, and associated with men. I gave no thought to my former existence, except during that first period of fear and trembling, when I believed I could not pass, and that discovery would suddenly end my wild dream.
And where is that from? You said
Milwaukee.
But the source, was that in what?
It was, oh man, I have it in Ralph's story, but I don't remember exactly. One of the newspapers in Milwaukee it came from.
Okay, it was a newspaper. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about, finding, their voices? How were you able to achieve that in the painting?
I think most of the time it's more possible with the ones that are more recent. So like Ralph and Jean-Benet were 1800s. So they're in the newspapers, right? It's a little less easy if it's further back, unless there was like a trial, then sometimes it'll be, maybe they're quoted in court documents or something. Sometimes they may have kept a journal, or maybe someone else kept a journal and talked to them or with them and then recorded that conversation. So sometimes it's not as direct, but yeah.
And then, from that, where like in terms of actually making the painting, then I guess my interest in that is knowing their voices or being able to sort of read what they've written or even potentially maybe hear something. Did that influence the painting in a different way from those who you could not hear from?
That's a good question. I guess sometimes in like how I'll depict them, I guess I can glean, like maybe their personality a little bit, like the pose that Lamacho is taking, in which they're kind of with a snarky look back towards us.
Yeah.
I can kind of glean that from their story because of how they acted. And with Jean-Benet, I wanted to depict them like this in a more like powerful stance. Originally, I had them inside in their bed with their partner because that's like the moment right before they died. But then thinking back on their life and their voice and how strong they were, I decided not to do that because it put them in a space of vulnerability that I thought like, that's great, but I also wanted to show them as like a strong person. And so here in this depiction, this area of San Francisco was the red light district at the time, and they had kind of banded together the sex workers into sort of a gang and created like a pickpocket gang to make a living. And so here I have them all standing there. Does that answer? Okay.
Yeah, no, it does. And I was just thinking that in this one, and I don't think it's this way in all of them, but they are, strided, they're sort of over the ribbon or the scroll at the bottom, right? They're kind of straddling it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think there's also what comes into play is the holy cards and the religious iconography. So shortly after I made that nun and monk piece that we started with, I ran into these guys at the MFA Boston. I used to teach a drawing class on Saturday mornings, and we were drawing in the medieval galleries, and I just looked up and I was like, oh yeah, it's St. Stephen and St. Vincent. And I just love how deadpan they are, even though St. Stephen has rocks in his forehead and there's like blood dripping down his skull. And I'd been thinking about, wanting to do the series, but didn't know what form it would take. And running into these two reminded me of the Catholic holy cards that I grew up with. And so I kind of just knew right away that I wanted to use them as a format to depict the people I was finding. So these are some of those holy cards that I grew up with. And there's a St. Hubert, and yeah, like, so they were like holy cards are sort of, they're still around. They're, people, mostly they hand them out at different, I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore, so I'm forgetting the sacraments, the different sacraments.
Yeah.
So at communion, at your first communion, at funerals, at your confirmation, you'll have holy cards that you give to folks that attend. They're meant to like teach people about the history of the Catholic Church. They're meant to remember folks who have come before, and they're meant as kind of like tokens of goodwill sometimes. I remember when I was that first year I was in Chicago going to school, I was having a really hard time. And my grandma sent me a holy card of St. Jude in the mail. And St. Jude is the patron saint of lost causes.
Wow.
And I was like, okay.
Wow.
But it was meant to say, like, I'm thinking of you, everything's gonna be okay. And I just really loved hearing the stories of the saints that are depicted. Usually there's a prayer on the back. This one is one of my faves because he's like just got his arm around the deer. Saint Lucy is one of my faves. She's always depicted holding eyeballs on her plate. She's patron saint of the blind. Both of my aunts were blind, and so that was like a Saint Lucy card was like pretty much a favorite in the house. And there's usually a lot of symbolism in terms of how they died, right? So she's got a cauldron back there. There's a couple other ones here. This is another Saint Lucy. I like how this one, she seems to be rolling her eyes a little bit. And then sometimes they're pretty gruesome, but always in a way that's like dignified. So this is Saint Bartholomew, and in the background you can see a little vignette of how Saint Bartholomew died. Like he's being flayed alive back there. But in the foreground, he's still standing. He's holding the implement that is being used against him. And for me, that always meant like strength, right? Strength in your beliefs, strength in your faith and your convictions. Like for me, this is Saint Bartholomew being like, I believe what I believe, and this is, I'm willing to die for it. And so for the Butch Heroes, it felt like, okay, these are people who were, often not allowed to live the way they wanted to live. And some of them were put to death for it, or put in jail or fined, or I felt like it was a good format to use to tell people their stories, to remember them. And plus I just love the bright colors and the borders and the iconography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess, some of the first ones that I painted, so the Katerina Link or Anastasius from the 1700s, I went like super Catholic holy card. So depicting how they died, really, really gruesome. And in other ways, like this one, the story reminded me of St. Lucy with the eyeballs on the plate. Like when Caterina Vazzani or Giovanni Bordoni died, they were almost canonized. And so I used a lot of the signifiers. So pale blue and the lilies meant as a symbol of virginity and purity, are often used in portraits of the Virgin Mary. When Giovanni died, they dissected them to try to determine the cause of homosexuality. And so in that paperwork, you can see all the organs that they looked at. And so I put all those organs on the platter, and I have them kind of holding it like St. Lucy would be holding their eyes. And they were seen as a virgin, even though they were quite the player. They had a lot of female lovers, but that was not seen as real sexuality because a man wasn't involved. And so they were still seen as a virgin, and then given a virginal funeral, dressed all in white, a procession and all of that. And crowds like flocked to the procession, and yeah, they were almost canonized. So I thought it was like a perfect story to fit in as a potential holy card.
Can you talk a little bit about the materials that you use? So, why gouache on paper as opposed to, say, oil on canvas, or, some other form of,
Totally. It comes directly from historical paintings like Indian miniature painting, the Book of Kells, those kinds of things. Like gouache is used in a lot of miniature painting and illuminated manuscripts because it's a very bright material. It's very bright colors, very opaque colors. And I knew I wanted to paint small because of the holy card format. So the paintings are scaled up twice from a holy card. So holy cards are roughly like 3.5 inches high, sometimes 4 inches high. And the paintings are about 7 inches by 11 inches. So they're just scaled up a little bit. And I just felt like it's a more intimate scale. Like, I think I've thought about, maybe in the future making like large oil paintings, but also like, I don't know. I've never been super, it's never been oil paint has never been my favorite medium to work in, let's just say.
I just threw that out there as a comparative. I wasn't necessarily, I was just more curious about the.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's just like based on the format, based on the holy cards, based on the color that can be produced.
Yeah.
That's why I chose gouache.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can we return for just a minute to the idea of the archive? Sorry, the idea of the archive.
Yeah, sure.
Would you ever consider, I'm just thinking about like, display or exhibition strategies. Would you ever consider showing your research alongside, so whatever you have collected in terms of ephemera or,
Yeah, totally. I've done that a couple times. I've displayed my own holy card collection with the paintings, and some of my aunt's holy cards as well. In terms of the other stuff, I have not shown it yet, but I don't think I would ever. Yeah, I would definitely be open to doing it. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of this idea of an archive of them sort of literally showing, your own archive and the research that you've done to
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why I also really like having the book as an object too, just because all of the sources and notes and things like that can be listed in that one place.
Right.
Nice.
And in the book, are they reproduced? What size are the images reproduced at? Are they smaller in terms of?
Just a little bit.
Or,
yeah, in volume 1, they're just a hair smaller. I believe the book is like 10 inches. So I think they're probably about 2 inches smaller. I think volume 2 might even be smaller from what I remember them saying. So yeah, they'll be closer to actual holy card size when it comes out the second volume.
Nice. And remind me, is the entire series in the Freedman Gallery's project space?
No, I can't remember how many there are in there, maybe 13. Yeah, total, I think I now have maybe 37 paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have they ever been shown all together, the entire collection? At whatever point you showed them, it was a full collection?
When I showed them the very first time, it was all that I had, which was 25 at the time. And since then, they've all been dispersed. And so hopefully someday, once the series stops, they can all be shown together again. That would be cool.
Yeah. I'm curious. So you had mentioned the emails that you've received recently about Carl Lapp, I think it was, and wanting to do research on that. Have you gotten, what are some responses, or have you been able to have discussions, with, say at an opening or when your work has been shown, how people have responded to them?
Yeah, I have discussions at, like, immediately what popped in my head is I was at an opening a couple years ago. It was at a private high school here in Massachusetts. It was out in Concord, and I was there for the reception, and one of the high school kids came up to me and asked me for advice on how to come out, and I was like, "Ah, okay." Like, it was really like, I was honored, but also like, wow, like, yeah. So like sometimes it takes different forms, I guess, that I was not expecting. Like, I just talked to another high school student in Missouri on Zoom last week that she wanted to do a project on non-binary and trans folks. And so we set up a Zoom call and we talked about non-binary and trans history and what we can do now as non-binary and trans folks, and how she could go about her research. And so it's been really fun. It's not just at the openings and the receptions, but it continues through email or through online discussions. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I think to be able to have those important discussions, and that also too that your audiences feel comfortable coming and talking to you about whatever is on their mind, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I'm a little bit like,
yeah, I'm sure,
off guard about it, because I'm like, oh man, I know you could.
Yeah,
There's so many other people you could talk to, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, it's doing something. Like, this project is doing kind of more than I wanted it to do, or more than I thought it would do. It's pretty cool.
Which is actually really great, and I think really gets at this point that I've been sort of talking about, which is this idea of futurity, and how this series can think about future lives, and hopefully it'll really help people to think about some of the issues surrounding queer lives and how to make them better in the future.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing it has taught me that I didn't expect is just learning about our history has been so comforting.
Yeah,
it's kind of just made me more comfortable in my own skin, and like more able to be myself, because there are so many of these folks that came before us, and in a lot of ways, made it work. We're able to like live their lives, and
yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing to hear some of these stories about just what they did and how they did it, and we're willing to live their best lives in societies that just did not accept them.
Yeah. Here, I'll stop sharing, I guess.
Should we open it up to questions from the audience?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to give the audience a chance to start putting some questions in on the Q&A.
Cool.
In the meantime, I was going to, just while that's happening, I will probably release the second poll. Everyone closer to like once we get some questions in. I was going to throw one out there just to start out. What was your experience with translation of other cultures' information when you were doing the research? Did it provide difficulty, or was it actually easier to understand whether someone was transgender in the context of your research, or was it actually harder based on syntax or translations? I'm actually genuinely curious if the translation was something that provided a challenge.
Yeah, because I think if you're just looking at the language, then a lot of other cultures' languages are very gendered, right? And so usually then I'm looking at the actions of the person and not necessarily like the words that are used to to describe them, but it's more like, how are they dressing? What kind of work are they doing? How are they, living their life? And I got help, like if I needed help with translation, I could reach out to friends and colleagues but yeah, it's difficult when
Definitely.
dealing with other languages.
What's that? So we have a question from Victoria. The fact that these people dared to exist as they were, defying cultural norms and risking being persecuted is what makes them heroes. But would you ever consider depicting cultures where being non-binary or transgender was actually embraced, such as in some Native American cultures? And would that be as empowering to depict? It's a great question.
Totally. Yeah, and I do most of the, I have, this thing popped up here.
Sorry about that.
There are a few in the series so far. Definitely some First Nation folks. There's a First Nation folk from the Stolo tribe in British Columbia that I'm about to paint, and they seem to have been respected and well received within their community. Same goes for a woman chief from the Absolute Nation. I painted her. So yes, there are a number of folks that I've included in that. And that's another thing that I find like really exciting, and I wish that we could, going forward, I feel like just in my lifetime, things have become more and more constricted in terms of gender and sexuality. So if we could just learn from that history.
All right, looks like I have another hand raised by Happy. Could you type it in? I'm trying not to put everyone out there talking if possible. Here we go, Abby Platero. Do you have any plans to do other types of deep dive historical projects like this, but with different figures or ideas?
I've been so focused on this for so long, I haven't really thought of what I would like to do next. I know whatever I do next is likely going to be research-based and narrative-based, just because that's how I generally work, like looking back at my past series too, but I don't necessarily know what yet. I still have a few more years working on this and then go from there.
All right. And from Wes, for centuries, Saint Sebastian and artistic depictions of his martyrdom have been associated with gay male culture. Is there any saint that has the same association with lesbians?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But dang it, who is that?
Hate the tip of your tongue kind of stuff. Just right there, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure there is, and now I'm not remembering. I want to say it starts with an M. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I can even see the image. And yeah, but yes, I love Saint Sebastian, by the way.
Any more questions? Anyone else? David Tanner, has your artwork always focused on gender nonconformity? If not, what was your earlier work like, and what other media have you worked in?
Yeah, no, it hasn't always focused on gender nonconformity. Well, the series that came before this did, like, it was a gender, sexuality, Catholicism, that kind of thing, from my childhood, which led into Butch Heroes. Prior to that, I was doing a series that was more narrative around like exploration and like mythical creatures, which when I look back on it, like definitely has some aspects of gender in it, and colonialism and things like that. I think the common thread between all three series would be sort of just narrative work. Yeah, and I've worked everywhere, everything from like in that particular series I was talking about, it was installation, it was sculpture, it was large scale drawings. I've done a lot of printmaking. Yeah.
Fantastic. Got another one. Have you ever thought of putting your collection of Butch Heroes as a NFT collection?
An NFT collection. I have kind of ignored that whole thing. I don't really want to go there. I don't even really, I know what it is, but vaguely, like, you know.
Everyone. All right, guys, I'm going to do a last call for questions. If you have a question and you're typing it out, if you want to just put your hand up and then I'll wait for you. If not, within like another minute or so, I will. Oh, we got one right there, Wes. It says, so amazing. Thank you for sharing your work and research. I encourage everyone to see this work in person in the gallery. It's an amazing experience in person. I 100% agree. I was actually down there today. It looks very, very lovely, and I'm very excited to go down there after this.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it also. I will make a trip up to Albright soon to see it.
Fantastic.
Send me photos.
Yeah, well, I will do that. I was here. You know, like.
Looks like we have one question being typed left by Wes, and then I don't see anyone else. And everyone's, the Abby Potero, just wanted to say thank you for your perspective and such an in-depth project. And I'm hopefully saying the name right. Ahmad is saying appreciate your time. Very nice. Looks like we're starting to lose some people, and I'm going to end that poll because we got full participation on the last one.
All right.
Sorry for the delay. Any more jokes?
I probably, yeah. I mean, I
Started with a good joke.
Yeah.
Do you have any knock knock jokes? Because my nephew loves knock knock jokes.
Oh man, I don't know if I have any knock knock question. Oh, there's a question up here with.
Yep.
Okay. How many people were in attendance?
I think we maxed out at 71. Wes, Century, St. Sebastian. Oh no, I think it's the same question, Wes.
Okay.
That I just got. Want to answer that question again? Do you remember the name of the saint that's associated with lesbians?
Do I remember the name of the saint? Hold on, let me.
Oh, he didn't hear the answer.
Oh yeah, I was like
No
struggling.
problem. We'll get you that answer.
Hold on, I'm gonna just look up real quick. The name that's coming to mind. No, it's not that. The saint I'm thinking of is a person that's similar to Saint Lucy, with eyeballs on her plate, but she's carrying her breasts on her plate. It's pretty intense, and I can't remember her name. And I didn't know that she existed, and that makes me think that it was censored from me when I was a kid, because I know all this.
Yeah.
So they were probably like, "This is too much."
Mm.
That one is my guess.
All right. Very
Yeah.
good. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you everyone for coming. If you get a chance, please, the reception is happening literally now, starting now.
Cool.
It'll be down in the Freedman Gallery. I want to give a quick thank you to both Erin Riley-Lopez and Ria Brodell for being here. It was a pleasure to have you both, and I hope to see you both here soon.
Saint Agatha, David says. Yes,
Saint
could be
Agatha,
Saint.
there we go.
Nice.
Could be.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, you too.